Well, good evening. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, and you've reached Divorce Deep Dive webinar series. I'm Steven Leskin. My law firm is Leskin Law and Mediation in Portland. I am glad to see so many people signed up. The topic tonight is high conflict, high conflict divorce. Uh, I think I just skipped ahead. Let me go back one. So tonight we're going to cover, well, uh, we're going to go in depth on high conflict individuals and in the context of mediation. And um, I'm going to talk about it like a little bit differently than you might expect, but we'll get to that in a second. So uh, we'll start with difficulties, get into something that's really important, choice of forms to negotiate with, and then multiple uh, techniques for negotiating with difficult people. And finally, we'll cover some safety concerns. Again, I am Steven Leskin. I was admitted to the Oregon State Bar in 1992, uh, which seems a long time ago now. I've been practicing family law since 2001. I'm the founder of One Day Divorce Mediation. My contact information is here, and I'll give it again at the end. So my this deep dive series, is intended to give people like a really focused um, introduction to a particular topic in divorce law. This is not an infomercial for me. You're not going to hear any self promotion during the next hour, 45 minutes or so. All you're going to hear is just me reflecting on this topic. I've been a lawyer for a lot of years. I've had um, thousands of interactions with all types of personality types, and I definitely have thoughts on like how you negotiate in this context, and we'll get into that. I don't generally take questions, not generally, I don't take questions during the webinars. I welcome people to call me. You're welcome to call me tomorrow. Send me an email if you have any questions or want to follow up with something that I talk about in the webinar tonight. I'm happy to set up a time to talk. Just tell me that you watched the webinar, and gladly discuss your issue or any issue that the seminar rose. The website videos will be on the website by the end of the week. Uh, you will see a ton of videos under the resource tab. There's videos on substantive issues in divorce law. There's video on how to negotiate with a spouse, what the differences are between litigation and mediation. Just a ton of videos. There's also a lot of articles and frequently asked questions on other topics related to divorce. So that's a good stopping place if you just want to get an introduction or you have a very specific question. And I try to structure these seminars as both overviews and then one topic that's really deep, like child custody or spouse support or paying uh, child calculating child support. Right? So I'll do a really deep dive on that and talk for an hour about one of those topics. So again, no questions, but I really am happy to take calls and emails tomorrow or later in the week if you want to contact with me. All right, so we're going to start this off kind of in a little bit of a different place. And that place is self-reflective for me. So when I do a webinar on spousal support or um, dividing property or the nature of debt in a marriage, that's easy for me to do. I could talk for an hour on that. It takes me, no time to put together the topic in my head, outline it, and then put together the PowerPoints. Those are easy. Those are very straightforward. Um, I've been doing this a long time. I know the law in the area. I'm very uh, comfortable discussing it. I do it every day. But putting together a webinar on a topic like dealing with narcissists, or in this case, dealing with high conflict individuals, uh, is a little bit more difficult because the first difficulty you have is like defining like what a high conflict individual is. And I will tell you some stories in the next couple of slides, and you'll see that like high conflict um, comes about from a lot of different places. It's not just, the spouse that's being a bully and demeaning and calling names. Uh, those are the stereotypes, but that's not necessarily the full range of what high conflict means. The other difficulty I really have is that like we want to understand like why somebody is high conflict, right? Like you figure if you understand it, then you can deal with it better. But my problem is that you can't attribute a psychological motive to a class of people, right? So you can't say that all high conflict individuals have a certain psychological profile that motivates them. It's not necessarily a random group of people, but you just there's no psychological basis in an abstraction, and the abstraction is a high conflict person. So, uh, so like Steven Leskin is not an abstraction. You can assign a psychological motive to me. You probably can assign many psychological motives to me, but to assign a psychological motive in an attempt to understand something to divorce lawyers, you can't do that, right? Not every my motivation for doing divorce is I like to help people get out of a bad situation into a better situation. That's what drives me. Uh, but what may drive another attorney is that likes the fees or um, uh, this is just the work that he was trained in or she was trained in, and that's why they do it. Just that's kind of how they ended up there by default. So um, that was just kind of a barrier that I ran into early on in thinking about, well, how do you explain what a high conflict person is, and how do you understand that person? And so I shied away from that approach. So then I thought, well, maybe I can look at the aggrieved person, right? Like, let's take it out of like the concept of high conflict and say, who is the aggrieved person? And um, I also had the same kind of difficulties with that. You can't, it's just too broad. So I was thinking, okay, so let's not define high conflict. Let's define an aggrieved person who's somebody who at the hands of another feels a lack of self-worth, uh, powerlessness, somebody who's gaslit and knows it, or somebody who knows that they're being manipulated and they feel like they have no recourse, that their efforts are futile. Um, but the same thing. Um, every person is different, and it's really hard, like for me to get my head around. Okay, so how do I prescribe uh, practices or techniques for a very, very wide and diverse group of people whose um, only thing in common is that they have certain feelings in context of a relationship. So that was the first problem I had with with putting this webinar together. The second thing is that um, I certainly think that people are subject to change, that people can change. I absolutely believe that. I've seen it in myself, uh, and I've seen failure in myself as well. So I know that people can change, that change is difficult, and maybe there are things that about ourselves that we cannot change. Um, and so, like when you think about like how you interact with somebody who's high conflict, there's a script that's been laid maybe for years, and changing that personal dynamic, maybe you can do it. You know, good on you if you can change the dynamic. Maybe through therapy or coaching, uh, but it is really hard to do. And so that gets me to that observation gets me to the next um, point that I kind of realized is that there are no pithy sayings that are going to help. There just aren't. There are. Um, there's just not. The change has to come from within, and I will discuss one like psychological thing that's helped me, and hopefully it will be of value to you. But um, the little like pithy things that people say to each other, like, don't whatever, aren't going to help. And then my final point, the other thing that um, like held me up, like putting this together, was how do you monitor your expectations? So much of our disappointments in life and our um, uh, feelings our, our feelings of being down are originate from expectations, whether they're rational or not. And many times our expectations are just ingrained in us. They're unspoken, they're assumptions. And then we judge against those. Uh, I don't want to use the word subconsciously, but um, just any, I'm just going to use the word subconsciously. We compare things subconsciously to our unspoken and maybe unrealized expectations, and that gives us um, result that may not, an emotional response that may inhibit us from moving forward. So those are some of the difficulties I had, like putting this together, and I wanted to get those on the table. So I just mentioned that I don't think that there are like pithy sayings that are going to help somebody, but there is a mindset that I learned uh, from AA, and um, that saying is that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with us. And I remember the first time I heard that, I thought, well, what does that even mean? And this goes to what I was just saying about expectations and disturbances. We're disturbed because we expect things to be one way, but they're not. We expect people to be nice to us, but they're not. We expect people to give us things or give us emotional support, and they don't. And that leads to a disturbance in us. And um, what's helped me grow and has been a benefit to me is that if I'm disturbed about something, it's my expectations that are being disturbed. Reality is what it is. The other person is who they are. They're not going to change. I'm not going to make them change. They may not want to change. They may be perfectly content with who they are. What I can change is myself. And getting rid of the expectations that lead me to feeling disturbed. So when I first heard this saying, I thought I would spend my first thought was that it was so profound that this little simple sentence that I would spend the rest of my life struggling to really understand what this means throughout my life. And maybe I was told this 10 years ago or 12 years ago, whatever it is. And I think about this every day. I think about it like when people call me, like all day I'm answering calls from people I don't know, and they're asking me questions that are pissing me off, and they're taking my time, and they're like just making me crazy. And I have to take back and say, they're just being them. If I don't want to, I don't have to answer the phone. If I don't want to be disturbed, I don't have to be disturbed. I can just be polite and uh, whatever, and go from there. And this um, is an important lesson in terms of like our relationships with high conflict people, because the only thing I control is my reaction to them, right? Which um, is said a lot and is not an uncommon thing to hear, but that reaction comes from like expectations of how things should be, and they're not. So um, the mindset that what you do isn't reflective on me and what you do doesn't control me, that takes years to develop, especially in context of a abusive relationship. Uh, and um, it's unrealistic to think that somebody who's been a victim of abuse or violence is going to be able to make that kind of separation from their abuser. But this is at least a starting point, and that I am me. I control my feelings. I control my expectations. I can use self-analysis to get to where I need to maybe change the dynamic a little bit, or figure out how to change the dynamic, or find the resources to change the dynamic. The other thing I would just say here, I didn't put this in the slide, is that I know, and as a lawyer or as a mediator, when I'm dealing with somebody who has been in an abusive relationship, I know that I will never understand them. I know that I will never understand their experience. My job is to accept it for what it is, to support them, never to challenge it. And if somebody tells me they were abused, that's their belief, unless I'm feeling that it's being used manipulatively. Uh, but we can only go so far in understanding others, and especially abuse is such a complicated psychological phenomenon. Sometimes that lasts years or decades or generations, that it's going to be really hard for me to understand. And I need to take that with me when I'm dealing in a session, or when I'm representing somebody who may be the target of abuse for years. That I don't, I'm not going to understand. I don't have to understand, but I have to be respectful of their experience and what they're saying as their reality. So I thought I would illustrate like some high conflict mediations and litigations that I've been involved in. And I thought that this would help give some insight into my process and some different thinking on what high conflict might look like. And I'm going to start with Dave and Samantha. And Dave is in his 30s, Samantha's in her 20s. And uh, uh, Samantha had trouble keeping an attorney. She had trouble keeping two attorneys. She had trouble keeping three attorneys. And the things that she does inadvertently, because she doesn't know better, she thinks she's imitating her attorneys. But what she's really doing is taking what should be a straightforward process and making it into mud. And that in itself is high conflict. She's her actions, whether inadvertent or um, not coming necessarily from a bad place, are just turning what should have been a simple matter into high conflict. The emotions get high when somebody does something that was like, what are you doing, out of left field, or where or this person will make accusations about me, or serious accusations about me or the client, which are unfounded. And so that kind of, and I think she thinks she's doing it like to be a good lawyer, but all she's doing is inflaming tensions. And so as a lawyer, it does not bother me. What bothers me is that my client is getting the brunt of this. But in terms of like dealing with her, my job is to stay focused as a professional, see through the personality stuff, and just stay focused on what's at interest in the case, right? And achieving my client's goals. So, in effect, what the high conflict nature of the divorce that this person has, let's just generously say, inadvertently created, um, doesn't change the underlying interests of the parties. And that's an important point to keep in mind, that what's ultimately important is not, well, is personalities, of course, but to get to a resolution, what you're negotiating with is interests, right? His interests and her interests are, there are points where there are points that they will align. My job is to create a situation where they do align. When I don't, I believe that my negotiation techniques have failed because I have failed to convince her that our interests align, right? So in this case, this young woman is not being, she's being manipulative. There's definitely a part of it that's being manipulative, but it's not like flame throwing. It's just ineptitude. But that ineptitude is causing a lot more conflict than there needs to be, and making settlement negotiations out much harder. So my job is to change the dynamic a little bit so that she'll see that her husband and soon to be ex-husband's interests and her interests a lie. So my job is to see through the personality stuff and stay focused on my client's goals and where their interests meet. Next case I want to talk about was a mediation and high income couple, and the income was from the wife. The wife was a executive and had done very, very well, and had done very, very impressive, except in terms of her personality skills. And almost immediately, things got off on the bad foot with the wife and I. She demanded to see my notes. She demanded to know like what I was going to be doing. She wanted like updates, and not in a polite way, like like like, and not like in an executive way, not like, when I like when somebody's working for me, can you please get me, a report by next Tuesday? This was, I want to know what's going on now. And I think that part of that was attempting to intimidate me. Part of it was attempting to throw me off balance. Part of it was an attempt to create a better situation for her in her mind going into the negotiation. And uh, what kept me on balance with her was the knowledge that her marriage was falling apart, her life was falling apart. Had a kid together, they had an adult child together. They'd been together since, I don't remember, the 20s, they're in the 50s, 60s now. So this was like, one of the most significant events in her life, and her world was falling apart. And uh, I'm not saying it's generous at all, but what helped me to deal with her compassionately was understanding that she had a loss of status. She had a loss of security. She had a loss of, maybe even a loss of face within her family and friend group. So there was a lot of loss and a lot of grieving. And the plain truth is, as a society, we don't know how to grieve. We don't know how to process our loss and our grief. And so, right or not, I chose to accept her behavior as worthy of compassion. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but that's what helped me to stay focused with her. Uh, I usually do my mediations over Zoom, and she insisted on doing it live, which was absolutely fine with me. I don't have a problem with that. But several times, and so the way I do live mediations, I put one party in one room, the other spouse in the other room, and I go back and forth, and I bring proposals back and forth until we get a resolution. And many times during the mediation, she'd get up, she'd walk purposely to the door and want to straighten her spouse out. And I literally would stand in the way and say, "You're not going anywhere. You are not doing that." And she backed down. And again, it was that was clearly attempts to intimidate and manipulate. And I think that the message is that if you're going to choose a professional, you have to have somebody who's as strong, if not stronger, than the participants. Um, and had I been a little weaker person, I might have said, "Okay, we'll go speak to him." But that's not what was going on. It was clearly an attempt to intimidate. Eventually, we got a perfect settlement. I was the settlement was right on the money. The settlement was the same as they had they gone to court and had a judge. The judge would have come back and said, "This is how we're going to do it." We spread sheet out the assets, and we came in exactly at what it should have come in. I have 100% confidence that the settlement they got was exactly right. And I think that happened because I was able to create a level playing field in a chaotic situation with a dominant partner who was not necessarily looking after her soon-to-be ex-spouse's best interest. I did stay in touch with the husband and found out that several months after the divorce that they were getting along and they were going to family functions and whatever was driving her was out of her system, and that they were, they'd found a new equilibrium and a new dynamic in their relationship. So, change possible. Not to say no, but change. But they came to that dynamic together as a couple. I'm certain that the husband had to make some adjustments to it in his thinking and his behavior in order to get to that spot. Uh, um, so the third case I want to talk about were two young people with a child, and they were negotiating over custody, parenting time, and child support. And this was a classic case of an abusive husband, physically abusive, emotionally abusive to the wife. I misspoke, to the mother, and so much so that so much so, I'm going to say that one more time, so much so that she chose to leave him and the young child with the husband. So um, that's not a good thing, but to me, that's just an act of desperation. Mothers don't leave their kids behind unless things are really bad. And that was confirmed by the mom's mom, just how bad the situation was. So eventually, husband filed to get custody of their daughter. I'm sorry, it was a son. And um, my position was a hard one that, this is what we want, this is what we're going to stick with. I'm being reasonable. We will go to trial if need be. And about halfway through the litigation process, they started talking, and eventually, husband got what he wanted. He continued to get what he wanted, and he convinced the mom to give up certain things, and it was just to my mind, it was just a continuation of the abuse. So um, we're not, and mother, like, when I would explain to mom, this is why this is such a bad deal. She'd be, yeah, but it gets it done, right? And so, like, there's value in that. It's not my place to judge that. It's her life, right? Uh, but like, I'm looking and thinking, okay, she didn't want to spend the money on attorney fees. I get that. I completely get that. But the long-term consequences to her decision now were not good for her. And I explain that. But her unstated goal was to reduce friction with the husband as much as possible after years of conflict. And I mean, it was bad conflict. Uh, withholding the child, not, cutting the child off from mom, and I had a problem with it, but ultimately it was um, mom's decision to make to accept a deal that got her freedom from short-term pain. And so usually when you want to set something up, I'm talking as a lawyer now, not as a mediator, when you are in this position, you want to set up the parenting plan so that it's always going to be a roadmap for the parties, but you want it to be something that's enforceable for the mom, right? Because that's how in this context, that's how you change the dynamic, right? You're giving mom an enforceable rule book if she wants to use it, or dad. But um, so the parenting plan becomes an enforceable way of changing the relationship, right? Dad can't come and take the child whenever he wants. Dad can't drop the child off 3 hours late. There are consequences to that the court will enforce, right? So that's where I wanted to get to with mom, but her pain from dealing with the father needed to be alleviated. At least that's the way I interpret it. And there's only so much that a professional can do in those circumstances. And, I tried to work with the client to see that her best interest lay down the road, not in the immediate. So our um, our negotiating tactic with the father was just, this is our position. We are not moving from this. And so no matter what he tried to propose or do, like, you're not moving the needle. Maybe you can move the needle if you treat the mom a little bit better, but we're not moving the needle. And so eventually he went behind my back and started negotiating directly with the client, and there was nothing I can do with that as long as she was continuing to accept his phone calls. So those are some stories that I've had with high conflict, and they illustrate the range of what high conflict looks like, and that it's not uniform, and it's not. It comes out in different ways, and it's not always yelling, it's not always gaslighting, it's not always name calling, but sometimes just the fact that we disagree over how much a spouse will receive in spousal support. Dad thinks it should be $500 a month. Mom thinks it should be $3,000 a month because otherwise she won't be able to live. Well, that makes a high conflict, right? That is a high conflict from them. They each have. Dad doesn't think he can afford more than 500. Mom doesn't think she can live on anything less than 3,000. That makes that a high conflict, right? And there are ways, you go back and forth and negotiate, and if you can't, then the judge will make the decision for you. But that's just another micro example of high conflict. So a case may have cooperation and moving in the same direction and disagreement, and then these high conflict issues as well. All right, so I want to get out of this psychological talk and talk more like a lawyer now. There are two forms to resolve a divorce. One is through the courts, through litigation, and the other is through mediation. I've been litigating since 1992, so more than 30 years. I've been doing mediation for about 5 years. And there are benefits and, well, let's just say there's just benefits for both. But I think that whichever form you choose, different forms will suit different conflicts. So if you are in a really, really, really high conflict relationship with a spouse where there is gaslighting, where there is blatant manipulation, where there is physical abuse and psychological abuse and all the terrible things that go on in a bad relationship, you're not going to be able to mediate that. You're not going to be able to sit across from your partner and say, okay, I think I should get half the equity in the house. You're not going to be able to do that. So in those circumstances, where you have a lawyer and the lawyer will say, this is our position and it's supported by the facts and the law. It doesn't matter what noise you make. This is where we're going. You might win. We might win, but we'll make that calculation based on, like I was saying earlier, what the interests are. We're still going to look through our interests to get a resolution, and what the documented facts are, and evaluation of how the parties present, all the intangibles, how the parties present in court, how well they're able to articulate their positions, all those things that you're going to look at. But if it's truly a zero-sum game, right? If one of the partners takes a zero-sum approach, then litigation is more appropriate. And in family law, attorneys never hit it out of the. Very rarely do attorneys hit. I have hit it out of hit it out of the ballpark, because the law demands. The law is that things be equitably divided, and that usually means evenly. And so we can quibble over what that means, but both parties are going to come out in a long marriage with essentially, equal shares. So it's somebody may take the position, I'm going to screw you in court, I'm going to take everything you own. But realistically, that's not what's going to happen. That could happen though in a mediation. A weaker spouse being manipulated, being dominated, could still fold in mediation and say, okay, I just want this to be done. I'm sick of this. It's not worth it for me. I just want to get out of here. Right. And at the mediation, just give everything away that they would have had they chosen to litigate. The downside of litigation is the length of time. It's a public proceeding. It's expensive. So those are things that mitigate against litigation. Uh, Mediation doesn't have that same downside, but with mediation, if you have the mediator is obligated to be a neutral, and to have an impartial regard towards each of the parties, and that's a term of art, which means you don't put your thumb on the scale, right? So it is possible to come out with a very, very lopsided award in a mediation that might not have happened in a litigation. Um, um, so when I've been in mediations where there is that power dynamic, uh, my response is to, do what I can to level the playing field a little bit. I explained to both parties that this is Oregon law, and um, this is where, this is how a court will analyze a case similar to yours. And, people have that knowledge, then they can make an informed decision about how they want to proceed, which is not necessarily the case with every mediator. Most mediators just, okay, well, let's just get a deal. Whereas, I'm using the law as a guardrails to get to a fair um, resolution that would kind of mimic where they would have ended up had they gone the litigation route. So choosing which forum, and then the other issue is an issue of trust and integrity. If there is so much abuse that the spouse doesn't know where the assets are, doesn't know where the income is has questions over where the debt is, then you cannot mediate because you need the power of a subpoena and um, the ability to compel the other side to produce all of their assets and liabilities and income. And you don't have that when you do go through the voluntary mediation route. A lot of courts mandate mediation. You're doing the litigation, and at some point they mandate that you sit down and talk things out. And that's fine. And in that model, you have some ability to have some ability. You have the ability to gather all of the factual information you need to evaluate the marriage. But the problem with that is that the stronger party could still say, screw you, I'm hereby, I don't have a choice to mediate. I'm not going to mediate in good faith, and I will still see you in court. So litigation in in every county in Oregon requires you to do some form of mediation, but that doesn't necessarily, that will not level the playing field in a lopsided relationship. So choice of forms is important and requires some good self-analysis about, whether or not you can do the mediation, like face in the same room or the same building with somebody, or on the Zoom call, and not say I'm just done with this. I'm just done. And if the divorce is cooperative and both parties they want a resolution, they're not out to harm the other or take everything, or then mediation is also appropriate then. The other question is, I get this a lot. I get a lot of calls from people who say, "Do I really need an attorney?" Uh, um, and I've talked about this in other videos. And um, the litigation process, the divorce process, has gotten so complicated. There are so many rules. It's not unusual for me who's been doing this for 30 years, to say, "Oh shit, I got to look up the rule again," or "Did the rule change?" or "How is this rule different in this county versus that county. And the legislature is often updating the ORS, the Oregon Revised Statutes, and the UTCR, the Uniform Trial Court Procedures, UTCR, Uniform Trial Court Rules, misspoke. And so there is a lot to know in a changing environment. And it is it is complicated. I mean, it is really complicated. And if you're going to do it right, you don't have that experience. You're just going to have more problems. You're going to make problems for yourself down the road that you don't anticipate now. The only time when, and I've said this in other videos, the only time when I think it's truly appropriate for somebody to self-represent is when the only thing that they need is the divorce. They need the legal paper that says you are no longer a married couple. People can do that on themselves. It's easy to download the forms, and there's no you can't really screw that up. On the other hand, if there's a house involved or retirement accounts, dividing those assets gets complicated. And there's just things that you're not going to know if you don't do this regularly. And sometimes even for me, like that, doing it regularly means like I know I need help on this point. I know I need to reach out to somebody who can steer me in the correct decision, in the correct way to get help from my clients. So, but that comes from knowing where the pitfalls are. So there are certain cases, so just to sum up, there are certain cases that people certainly can do themselves, but generally not recommended because of the complexity. And certainly I should just bring this back to high conflict people. If you are dealing with a high conflict person, I'm not going to say, like when I think about like the third story that I told about the unmarried couple, if you're willing to stick to your guns, you will get a better result. Right? So in that case, the young woman just kind of gave up. So having an attorney didn't help her, but well, it helped her up to a certain point. But if you're in a high conflict situation, having somebody deal with it who's not emotionally invested, who's used to dealing with this, who has the skills to stay focused enough on the party's interests, then hiring an attorney is definitely in your best interest. Okay, so here are just some tactics for dealing with high conflict individuals. We started talking at the beginning about changing the dynamic, and I said there would be no pithy sayings, but I want to start that with the observation that only you control your emotions, right? So you just leave it at that. Your emotions are yours. For a lot of high conflict individuals, they're high conflict because they know that the dynamic works in this context, right? They know that they're going to get a reward. So a part of your training and thinking about things is don't reward the dynamic. Figure out how, if it's safe, right? I gotta come back to that. If it's safe, then think about how do I change the dynamic? How do I change the reward system here? Apparently yelling has gotten results in the past, so people continue to yell. What if you say, don't yell at, please don't yell at me. I'm not going to respond. How does changing that change the reward structure of the relationship? And again, like what I started with is why this was so hard for me to put together, because I know how hard that change is. I know that the pithy sayings like only you control your emotions is easy to say but hard to do, right? It may be a truism, but it is really, really hard to internalize. And then finally, are you in a safe environment, right? I mean, that's a fundamental question. Are you safe? If you are not in a safe environment, then you need to make the change. You need to change the environment. And again, I know that's easy to say. There are economic factors, there are familiar factors, maybe there's social factors that keep somebody in place. And it's easy to say, well, change the environment. and this is why, again, this is why I had trouble putting this together. But it's just and of course, if you're not safe, you're thinking, oh, how do I leave? But a lot of abused women will, that night they'll be back with their husbands in bed because they have no place else to go, or they don't want to make the situation worse, or whatever goes on in their head. Not my, it's what it is. So it's easy to say these things, and as a professional, I have to acknowledge that it's easy to say. Um, but as a professional, I also have to accept that this is my client's reality, and it may not be easy to change. Okay, so here are just some suggestions for dealing with high conflict individuals. Don't engage emotionally, stay calm and neutral. Don't mirror their intensity. Don't take it personally. And so these are all things that we started with if I'm disturbed about something, there's something wrong with me, right? The expectation is that people are going to treat me with respect, or they're going to not push my buttons, and this person is pushing my buttons, so I'm letting them push my buttons, right? At some level, there's a choice there. And so, get in that framework that if I'm getting upset about this, I control that. It's for me to control. And again, I know how easy that is to say when the script has been long, the relationship has been long. But sometimes just having that knowledge that, oh, this person's trying to manipulate me is worth everything. And I don't want to be manipulated, right? I get that all the time. Not all the time. I get that a lot in my practice where somebody wants something from me and they're trying to, use, you want something, just ask for it, right? But people make suggestive comments or whatever, and the light bulb goes on being manipulated. And I don't want to be manipulated, right? So knowing that you're being manipulated, knowing that you're being gaslit, having that knowledge. Once you have that knowledge and you can recognize it, then you're making a choice. In response to a high conflict person, be brief. You don't have to justify or explain. Stick to the facts. Don't match hostility with hostility. Maintain the cooperative, focused, constructive tone, and then set your boundaries. If somebody's calling you names, you say, "Please don't call me names." Do it again. Your boundary is being violated. I'm not going to let my boundaries be violated. We need to change something here. Maybe we need to take a break. Maybe this needs to end. But I'm not going to, this is my boundary and I'm sticking to it, and you're not going to cross it. The note here is set clear boundaries, be consistent and enforceable. Don't negotiate your boundaries repeatedly, and use conditional statements with intention. Meaning, if you call me a name again, we will break for the day. That's a conditional statement, and stick to it. Right? That's the only way you change the rewards. And sometimes the reward is just watching you get upset. Right? I forget, there's a name for that. I can't quite think of what it is right now. But saying something provocative just to get a response is a reward. Take it away. You don't have to give it. Some other things that helps. As an attorney, I never blame. We're just sticking to the facts. We're just sticking to practical solutions. As I should have said, as a mediator too, we're not about blame here. We're about, a constructive resolution to our differences. With high conflict individuals, they often go back to the past and want to bring up stuff from the past. It puts you on the defensive, but that's not what you're here for. You're here about the future. Always focus on the future. Remember that the future is always about hope. We look to the future for hope and salvation. But we look to the past for identity. And when somebody goes back to the past, they're trying to create your identity for you. Right? So the future, the focus is on the present and the future. Right? So don't let blame, don't let rehash. We're not going back to that. Stay focused on the here and the now and the tomorrow. And then finally, just a really, really practical suggestion is you don't want to get gaslit. right? People don't want to in a negotiation. So always keep contemporaneous notes, and maybe where there's an agreement at the outset, you agree that we have a page for how to divide the assets. And at the end of that, you write down husband's going to take Bank of America, wife is going to take Wells Fargo, sign that page. Moving on to retirement accounts. Husband's going to take the Fidelity account, wife is going to take the Legg Mason account. You write it down specifically and sign it. So there's no possibility of being gaslit. And then finally, um, um, there is a professional out there who, so one of the biggest barriers to finding professional help is fees, and fees are no doubt high. But I'm going to tell you that if you call around, you will find people who charge less. You find people who charge more. People don't fail from lack of resources. They fail from lack of resourcefulness. There are people out there who will help you, but it may take you some effort to get there to find them. So if you are in that situation, find somebody to help you because it will be less emotionally invested for them. They'll help you stay focused on your goals, and mostly they'll run particularly like in a mediation session, they'll run interference with an abusive partner. So that's it. That's my talk, and that's my thinking about high conflict resolution. Um, and as somebody who deals with conflict every day, and I kind of, as I'm mature, kind of come to embrace conflict. I mean, I hate arguing with my wife, but it clarifies things, right? Conflict clarifies when it's done well. And I know, there are attorneys that I deal with routinely, and we butt heads, and at the end of the day, it's just like two professionals butting heads. That's fine. And I don't lose respect for the person for having a different opinion. We're paid to have different opinions. Uh, but that's an example of conflict being productive, not negative. So in conclusion, to the best that you can, change the dynamics of the past is not prologue, and where you can get to a place where the future is about hope. Hire an experienced professional, and remember, I think the real takeaway from my thinking is that high conflict people come in all shapes and sizes, and they are motivated by many, many, many different things, and that makes any kind of blanket statement about high conflict people impossible. So that's it. That's all she wrote. Thank you for joining me tonight. My my contact information is right here. Again, I am happy to take calls tomorrow, next couple days, to talk about anything that came out of this webinar. So once again, Steven Leskin signing off from Portland, Oregon. Thanks for joining me tonight.